Hello, my name is Layne, and I'm currently a graduate student at Longwood University. I have been a classroom teacher for the past 23 years. I've spent most of that time in third grade classrooms, but I'm currently in a looping position that loops with kindergarten and first graders. So, with that being what I plan to do for the remainder of my career, I thought that it was very fitting for me to focus in on those earliest foundations of literacy. And I was fascinated by all of the things that I learned through my research. When I began this research, I came upon this quote by Shanahan, who asked us to consider reading and writing as two buckets drawing water from a common well or two buildings built on a common foundation. This to me made a lot of sense based on my experiences with students in the classroom. And so I decided to look further into those connections between reading and writing. My main goals for this session are to first to present you with the research which I have reviewed, followed by talking about the instructional focus that this leads us to and going into the practical application of this research within the classroom. While conducting my research, I read so many articles and so many different things by experts. And I just wanted to pull out a couple of things that were really important in my viewpoint. This first study was a study about kindergarteners and their use of scaffolding with these students within the classroom. And what the researchers found was that scaffolding children's attempts to write by guiding children as they work through invented spellings has been shown to improve phonological awareness, spelling abilities, and word reading abilities of kindergartners. In a study completed by Sharon Craig, she pointed out that children who learn to use phonological information to encode and decode print consistently demonstrate gains in reading and spelling in the first grade and maintain these gains in future years of schooling. I thought that both of these spoke to my audience today, which I'm hoping is primarily kindergarten and first grade teachers, since we are the foundation builders for the rest of the literacy career that these students will be experiencing. As we all know, the experts do have a lot to say, and so I pulled out a couple things from prominent experts within the field. Kilpatrick has pointed out to us that 3 out of 4 types of specific reading problems, dyslexia, hyperlexia, and compensators, have direct connection to word-level reading difficulties. And Airy has pointed out that teaching students to decode unfamiliar words and enabling students to store spellings of familiar words bonded to their other identities in memory should be central goals of beginning reading instruction. When you consider how closely related that learning to spell and learning to read actually are, it really highlights how important that relationship between sounds and letters is. And it shows that it's important that our students are being given an opportunity to master, not just be exposed to those sounds that go along with those letters. I was also really mind blown when I came across this in a research study where they pointed out that when they looked across the board and they analyzed what students were being expected to do within classrooms, they discovered that by 8 years of age, children spend up to half of their school day engaged in writing tasks. This made me pause and really consider the day that I spend with my students and consider how many of the activities that I'm asking them to participate in are reliant on them being able to write. So take a minute yourself and consider what your classroom is like. How much time are your students spending in a day writing? I don't mean writing instruction. I'm not talking how much time are you spending teaching them to write. I mean, how much time are your students spending with a writing utensil in hand, putting words onto paper? Take a minute and just think about that. It's substantial, isn't it? When I consider that, when I look through my day, my students, from the time they walk in the room in the morning, there are opportunities for them to write. There are expectations for them to write. It might be something like their name. It might be to write their name on the lunch choice board. It might be to write a note to a friend. It might be journal writing. It might be completing a worksheet or writing down words out of a book that they've been reading. Sometimes we're talking about creative writing. Sometimes we're talking about academic writing. Even in kindergarten and first grade, we are expecting our students to write extensively. And Louisa Moats has pointed out that writers who have to think too hard about how they're going to spell use up a lot of their processing, which slows them down in that compositional phase. And a lot of the times, those writers will even choose to substitute easier, less complicated words, which then affects their written product. So it's important that we are adequately preparing our students for what it is that they're going to be expected to do in the future. When we consider what all of this means with regards to instruction, I think that it's really important that we pay attention once again to what Kilpatrick is telling us. And Kilpatrick has told us that if the best prevention and intervention approaches were widely used, the percentage of elementary school students reading below a basic level would be about 5% rather than the current 30 to 34%. That is significant. That is something that we should all strive for, because each one of those kids that sits in front of us as a classroom is a chance for us to make sure that we're putting a reader out into that world. And so we have to look at what these best prevention and intervention approaches really are. When I consider how these connect with writing, I looked at what statistically significant findings the researchers came across within their studies. One study by Abbott and colleagues discovered that instructional programs could be developed that integrate spelling and composition instruction to capitalize upon these reciprocal relationships. And the reciprocal relationships that we're speaking about here are between reading and writing. In a study by Sharon Craig, they discovered that the intervention groups who used blending at the point of need during writing and word building was demonstrated to have a positive impact on advanced word reading development. And within this study, this was an interactive writing study, and the control group that was not being given the point of need instruction, they were being given direct instruction on blending. They did not produce what they had been instructed upon within their writing. the group that they used who was receiving the blending at the point of need showed far better gains in advanced word reading development. That was statistically significant within that study. Since we've established that what we're discussing today is word level reading and writing, we should now take a look at what the experts tell us about effective word level interventions. These include reinforcing phonics skills, which indicates that students are being taught phonics through a systematic program, and that phonemic awareness needs to be taught to the advanced level. Based on all the information that we've now looked at from the researchers and the experts in the field, we now need to consider this with a practical application in mind. As somebody who's been in a classroom for over 20 years, I am well aware of the limitations that we have on our time. I also am well aware that students need the time and the space to master skills, not just to be exposed to different things, but to have an actual chance to use, to process, and to master those things that they're being taught. And so I looked at practical application through that viewpoint. I also really considered planning with the end in mind here. When I came across that information about students spending half their day writing by the time they're 8 years old, it really made me consider how I'm preparing them for those activities in the future. As teachers, our goal is always for our students to apply the knowledge that we have attempted to impart. And so my proposal is that you use interactive writing within your classroom on a daily basis to meet students at the point of need, so that you can scaffold what it is they are doing and what they are receiving support with based on what they need. As you can see in these photos I have here, these are examples of times when I have been working with students at the point of need. And you can see that we have addressed different issues. In the first picture and the top to the left, you can see that this child was writing and came across the word just. He stopped when he got there because he wasn't certain how to move forward. He knew that G can say J, like in giraffe, or that J can say J, like in jar. And so he needed help making a decision about which was correct. In the next two pictures, which are also with the same student, he came across the word baby. He was able to sound that out with my assistance at scooping, and he knew instantly that Y at the end of a word can either make the E or the I sound, because this is something that we have learned in class, but he wasn't confident about writing it on his own without my help. We also then took it a step farther, because we had a discussion about how if we took that BY and just wrote that independently, that would say by, like as in this was written by the author. And then I went a step further to show him that there was another by, like when we say goodbye when we're leaving. If you are interested in any further reading, I would recommend any of these things found on my reference list as good reads for an elementary teacher. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If you have any further questions or comments about what I've shared today, please feel free to email me at the email shown on the screen. And I hope that moving forward, you will consider my practical suggestion of spending more face time with students when they are writing in the early grades to help them master those foundational skills that are so vital for their reading moving forward.